So we're in chapter 12, your last chapter of your government book, and we're in section 2, the political participation in America. This is pretty important because it's going to talk about you as a citizen and how you can participate politically in our government. What can you do? What can you not do? And what does it mean to participate in our government? And so we're going to start, and there's going to be this is going to talk first about the citizen in the military, and then going on to the citizen in voting, how you can vote, and talks about how you vote, and in detail. We're going to go over that. And then it's going to go on to the citizen in the political parties, what kind of political parties, and the citizen in interest groups and lobbying, that kind of stuff with interest groups. And on to, let's see, the citizen in public opinion polls, the citizen in polls, and on to the citizen in the news media. How does the news media affect us? And going on to the citizen, the last part, the citizen and his character. What kind of character do we need to have as being a citizen? So these are all going to be in this section. I might have to do this in 2 sections because it looks like it's kind of a long, it's actually the last section of your book, and then there's one little part at the end I'm going to go over a bit. Let's talk about political participation in America. Let's talk first about the citizen and the military. I think it's important, especially if you're a young man. Here's a picture in the military right here. So what does it mean, that we have to go and sign up for the draft? What does that mean? So let's talk about this. So first of all, the citizen in the military is important because the purpose of our Constitution is to provide for common defense. So that's the purpose our Constitution has set forth. And so it's a major deal. So many people, think about the military, and some serving in the military for a short time, and some serve in the military for a long time, a lifetime. When you talk of the military, you're talking about what? You're talking about the armed services. We're talking about the Army, we're talking about the Navy, the Air Force, National Guard, Marines, so these are all part of our military. So it's easy to forget the primary purposes of our government, that we need to have a strong military, and how important that is. So since Vietnam, basically our military has been all volunteer, but under President Carter, he had young men register for the draft. So all male citizens, the nation does have a registration process, whereby all male citizens and aliens must register for the draft. Conscription, or the draft, so right here it says conscription or the draft, is a system whereby able-bodied men are required to join a particular branch of the nation's armed forces for a certain period of time. The draft is based on the principle that all able-bodied men should share in the responsibility of protecting the community, the state, and the nation by which they live. So that, that conscription is important. So it goes here, it talks about, here we have a picture here of a Army Staff Sergeant welcoming a new recruit at a recruiting office. And so basically this person coming in to go into the military here in the government. But let's talk a little bit more. Since 1980, President Carter, I said this before, registration has been reinstated. So the president can now require that registration with the permission of Congress now. So that basically the president says he requires for men to register, but Congress then has the right to raise and support armies. So it has that bill had to be approved by Congress. And so now all male citizens and aliens must register for the draft within 30 days after their 18th birthday. So when you turn 18 as a young man, you need to register. And this registration is handled through the Selective Service System that can be done at the United States Post Office. And so that basically you go there and you fill out this form, which requires your name, your address, your telephone number, your date of birth, social security number, and then a few weeks you'll receive a letter that confirms that you are registered for the draft, right? But now this system doesn't involve any draft boards or draft cards or classifications or any questionnaires or even physical exam. They don't give you a physical exam or anything, because basically what they want to know, in case there is a huge national emergency, they have a list. If we go to have another World War III or something, they have a list of these young men in the country. So it doesn't mean that you have to go and join the Army. You don't have to join the Navy or Marines, or even join any, but that your name is listed on it in case there was a big national emergency. Is all that means. So that's the military. So now let's talk about the voting process. And this is, you really need to know the voting process now. We've had all kinds of problems, in the last few elections, haven't we, of people examining our voting process and basically how, it can be done, in an illegal manner. Let's just say that. So the citizen in the voting process. So we're really blessed that we can vote, right? And this is so important that we enjoy this to be a representative, to vote for our representatives of the United States of America. So we can do these. Here's a list here. As Americans, what can we do in the voting process? First of all, we can contact our elected appointed officials. So we have a freedom to petition, to set forth a petition and contact them, to petition them. Then we can discuss and debate political issues, because we have the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, and the freedom of assembly. So we can discuss and debate political issues freely. So we can vote, and the vote is extended from the 15th, 19th, and 26th Amendment. The 15th Amendment allowed those that were freed from slavery to vote on the 15th Amendment. The 19th Amendment was a great one because it allowed women to vote. Women could not vote before the 19th Amendment. And the 26th Amendment might be important to you. It means that 18, 19, and 20-year-olds could vote. Before that, you had to be 21 to vote. But then again, they were sending 18-year-olds to war in the Vietnam War, but they couldn't vote. So the 26th Amendment came and said, yes, 18-year-olds can vote. So voting. So peaceful demonstration. We can peacefully demonstrate. We have the freedom of assembly. So we can contact and petition our elected officials. We can debate political issues, and we can vote, and we can peacefully demonstrate the freedom of assembly. So it's important here. It says, I like this part. It says, these freedoms may be detrimental if righteous citizens do not utilize them. So it's important that we utilize these things, so that we can, in doing so, we can utilize them for righteousness. So I like this part too, but I don't like it. It's kind of a thing that we know even now, that there is just as much opportunity for the advancements of ungodly causes as there is for the advancements of righteous ones. That means if we don't do anything, the ungodly will. We have a lot of loud, ungodly people that want to have they're going to work harder to advance their causes than do God's people. God's people just say, okay, we're just going to let it go, whatever. Well, it's easy, we'll just do whatever. But then those people that have loud voices, and are very ungodly, and of course Satan has loud voice, doesn't he? To voice their opinion, and they work harder to get their ungodly laws across. Just let's say that. So I like what Charles Finney, I've read quite a few books on Charles Finney. I really like him. You know, he was basically that pastor during the second revival, great revival in America. And Charles Finney said, basically said, and take right ground with regard to politics. So he basically said, but to do so, we must know how to influence our form of government. Charles Finney said, yes, we need to take ground with right politics, you know, because if we don't do this, wrong politics are going to take over, right? So, voting. So, of course, voting. So, after passing the Constitution, and of course we know that we can vote, and we've had some amendments on that, and we went over that. The 15th, just remember the 15th Amendment, onto the 19th Amendment, onto the 23rd Amendment. Those amendments are or 26th Amendment. I'm sorry, I said 23rd. Those amendments are very important. You know, for women to vote, the 19th Amendment, 26 for 18-year-olds to vote. So now we have over 229 million people, or about 75% of the population. You know, the potential voters in the United States has swelled over to 229 million people, or about 75% of the population can vote now. Of course, you can't vote if you're under 18. Otherwise, if you're a citizen in the United States, you can vote. To register to vote. Let's talk to how do you register what do you do to register to vote? First of all, you need to register to vote in the state where you reside. So you have to go to the state, that state. Make sure you're not living, you can't go register to vote in the state where you don't live. You have to be a citizen of the United States, and you also have to be a legal resident of that state for at least 30 days in the state. So if you just moved there and it hasn't been 30 days, you're not going to be able to vote in that state. So you appear before the county official at the county courthouse to register to vote, or to go where they say you can register to vote, usually the county courthouse. And they'll take your name and your address, and you have to have a means of identification, either driver's license, and then to prove your citizenship. If you have not been born in the United States, you might have to present, you know, your naturalization. But if otherwise, you have to bring your birth certificate. Then you have to be able to make sure that your age, that you're 18 on your birth certificate, and that you're a local resident of that state. Now it gets pretty easy, because nowadays they have what's called the motor voter. So the motor voter law now, when you go and get your license, or you have to go to the DMV in your state, at the motor voter, when you go to get your driver's license, they'll say, would you like to register to vote? And they'll take your name and everything there to register you, to make sure that you are registered to vote. It's motor voter law. A citizen may now go to the DMV. When they go to the DMV, they can register. So then now on election day. So what do you do on election day? So not all elections are the same. In fact, there's different elections to go to. In fact, there's two categories of elections. You'll have the first category being primaries, and then you'll have the election, basically the election day, where you'll elect those representatives, whether they be the president of the United States, or, you know, governor, or whatever. But primaries, let's talk about the primaries, because that's the first category of elections. For a primary is a party election. So for a primary election, you usually have to be registered to vote of that party. That means if you're a Democrat, you go to the primaries for the Democrat Party, and you vote for Democrats. You're voting actually for those Democratic candidates that are going to run, especially for president. So there's closed primaries. That means that you must register with that party, or you cannot vote at all. And then there's open primaries where you need not register with the party, but you still are going to be voting for only one party in there, but you don't have to be registered with that party, and those are open primaries. And then there's blanket primary, which is a type of open primary where the voter has a split ticket there to vote for. So basically, the closed primary, the voter must register to vote with the party and may vote only for the candidates in that party. Open primary, the voter doesn't need to register with that party, but he must vote for only one party. So those two different things. So if you're like a Republican, you can go to the Republican primary to vote for your candidate that you want to run, especially for president. So it says some states require that a candidate win by a majority, more than half of the vote. Otherwise, if they don't, they'll have a runoff primary that will be held to run the two top candidates to find. So you may have to vote again if they don't have a majority, or they don't win legally there for that primary. You might have to run it again to find out. But that's if the voting is very, very close. Here's a picture of the citizens of South Carolina are voting in the midterm primary. It's a primary election. They're voting for those candidates they want to run. And so Congress back in history, before 1930s, they held what's called party caucuses, and then they would choose their candidates for presidential race. They really wouldn't have a time where the party members would come in and have a convention. They would just have a caucus, and they'd get together and discuss who would be their candidates, called a party caucus. But in the 1930s, they decided to have party nominating conventions, and these replaced those caucuses. And conventions are even used today. So the delegates of the party, they vote to determine who would be the presidential nominee from that party. But many of these delegates are influenced by the presidential primaries that are held prior to this. So it's really important. The primaries are really important because they will pick out what candidate they want to run for president of the United States in the general elections. So the two classes of voting, primaries you can vote for, the other class is the general elections. So the general elections are regulated by federal law and by state laws. In 1845, congressional elections were had to be held on the first Tuesday following the first Monday of November. So this November, that first Tuesday, we'll be electing a new president of the United States. So that's Congress put forth that time, and presidential elections are to be held on the same date, but every 4 years, on that same date in November, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So this is set by the Constitution at the time, and also the Congress said that we had to use secret ballots. So as people came in, their ballots were kept secret, so no one really knew who you voted for. Before that time, before the Constitution, they didn't have to have secret ballots, but now, since the Constitution set forth, so it says here, most federal elections and virtually all governing and local elections are left to the individual states. So other elections will be left to the states. And most states hold their general elections for state offices on the same day that federal elections are held. So that means when you go to vote for the President of the United States, you're also going to have to vote for a lot of your state officials. You might have to vote, for your senator, or you might have to vote for your House of Representatives, or you might have to vote for the district, or maybe even the school district, or you'll have a list of different people to vote for. So you have to be very informed, not only on the presidential candidate, but the other offices that you'll be voting. So you'll go there and you'll see a whole list, and that's who of this list you're going to have to know about each one of these candidates and what they represent as you go to vote. So on to here, it talks about precincts. So that's on that same day that you go, but you have to go to your certain precinct to be able to vote. So voting precincts, that precinct is set down, and so you'll find out where you have to go and vote. It has to be small enough so that voters don't have to stand in long lines. So they have all these different precincts, and you'll have to find out where you live. That's where you're supposed to be able to vote, at that precinct. Nowadays, a lot of times they don't, and especially in California, they kind of did away with the rural precincts and had them all mail in. But before that time, we'd always go to a certain precinct, a certain place where usually it may be a school or a community place where you would be able to vote. The hours on voting day are usually 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and you have to be registered usually before you do. Some places you don't, but most places you have to be registered before. And you go in to where the official registered voters are, and you'll be able to vote there. It's overall responsibility. Well, anyway, let's talk about that. It says ordinarily a county official is called he's called the registrar of voters. Sometimes they call him the supervisor of elections, and he should basically be overall responsibility for conducting the elections. So I'll have that, and he is responsible to see that on election day, each place has a polling place. It has voting booths, ballots, a ballot box, or a voting machine, and poll books that are listed with qualified voters. So when you come in, it will be all set up. And this guy, basically the registrar of voters, has to make sure that this is all done in this precinct, to make sure that the voting goes well and everything is there that's needed. And then each polling place is overseen by an election board whose members conduct the election, and they should be responsible for seeing that only qualified voters can cast ballots. And they also will be counting the ballots to see counting the ballots, and what the voter turnout, and counting the ballots at that point. And each political party is supposed to have a poll watcher there to watch the polling place to see that the election is conducted in an ethical manner, that they're not cheating on the ballots, that there's no cheating or basically nothing fishy going on where certain voters are not allowed to vote for some reason, or that poll watcher makes sure that when they're counting the ballots, that they're counting the ballots correctly. It's very important. So if a poll watcher sees something fishy going on, he may challenge, if a person is there that doesn't really have the right to vote and is allowed to vote, he may challenge that, or he believes that a person is not qualified in some way to vote. And then, of course, he is supposed to be there to watch that they do not cheat on the counting process, right? So, upon arriving at the polling place, so what do you do when you get there? First of all, you present your identification to receive your ballot. And this ballot is either done by the Australian ballot system or the secret ballot system. Basically, this Australian ballot system is a secret ballot, but it's also, since the 1890s, we've used this same type of ballot system. but now voting machines are used today. So before, they of course didn't have voting machines, but we use those voting machines today. So in 2002, before 2002, we had these little punch cards that we're supposed to punch out. But after 2002, they thought this is not working very well, so they decided to do away with the punch card system. So now they have two different types of machines that are used in voting. One machine is called the Electric Data Processing Machine, EDP. And this is an optical scanning where you fill out these little circles or arrows. So the electrical data machines uses markings. These voters mark their choices with the marker provided by filling in these circles and then completing the arrows. And then the voter puts his ballot in the machine, and the machine tallies the votes, in the midst. The other type is the direct response electric system, which is DRE system. And this is where the voters make their selections on a touch screen. They're touching a screen and they push buttons, either push buttons or touch the screen to vote on their candidates. So now we have the DRE. Direct is just touching the screen or pushing buttons, and then of course the electric data is using markers to mark them off. Those two, the two different ones. So, and then we also have the absentee ballots that come through. So, but again, if under general elections, you can look, there's two different types of ballots. So these ballots, one ballot is, let's go on and choose here. Here's the absentee ballots absentee ballots is when they're not going to be there, because they're out of town or something, and they send in their ballots ahead of time. And they call these absentee ballots. And they can fill these out before time. And here's a guy going over all the absentee ballots. This is where they've had problems in the midst of saying that there was problems in the absentee ballots, counting them. So, but anyway, I'm not going to get into that. So there's two different types of ballots that are used in the general elections. One is the office group ballot, and the other is the party group ballot. So the office group ballot, the only difference is, you have candidates that are grouped according to their office. So you'll have, we're going to vote for president. There's going to be two candidates for president. We're going to vote for senator. There's going to be two candidates or more candidates for senator. Those are the office group. And then they'll have the type of, which is called the party group. And that's what, if you're a Republican Party, if you're a Republican, you can just check, I want to vote for all the Republican candidates. And you press you put that Republican, just that mark on the Republican, and then boom, bing, 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 all the Republican candidates are voted for, or all the Democratic candidates are voted for, whatever your party is. So just remember, in the general elections, there's first of all, the office. If you're voting for the office, you vote for each office that you're voting for, or you have the party, and you just bingo, put down your party, and then it'll vote for all of those in your party for you. So, and that's the easiest to do, is voting for that party. But then again, you're going to have to vote for some other things too, besides just the parties too. You'll have to vote for superintendent of schools, all these different things. You'll have to vote for different things, and also have to vote for the propositions too. So don't think, all I have to do is check the party, because there'll be other things on there besides party members. But at least you'll know, I want to vote for that party. What candidates are of my party? So, So I like this part here. This is important. It says, the voter's responsibility lies not just in casting a vote, but in casting a vote for the right person. Our founders certainly recognized this fact, as evidenced by the wisdom of Noah Webster. I like what he says here, voting for the right person. So he says, and I'm going to kind of skip through this a bit. Basically, number one, God commands you to choose for rulers just men who will rule in the fear of God. The preservation of a Republican government depends on the faithful discharge of this duty, to choose rulers that are just. that rule with the fear of God, number one. Number two, if citizens neglect their duty and place unprincipled men in office, the government will become corrupted. So the laws will be made not for the public good, but just for selfish purposes of those in charge. So it's so important that we do not neglect our duty so that we vote for the right people in office. Number three, corrupt or incompetent men will be appointed to execute the laws. The public revenues will be squandered on unworthy men, and the rights of the citizens will be violated or disregarded. Saying if we don't vote, and we allow corrupt, incompetent men or women to execute our laws, then all of our taxes and our money will be just squandered on terrible things and squandered on unworthy things and unworthy men. And so our rights will be violated because we've allowed evil men to be in charge of us. Number four, if a Republican government fails to secure public prosperity and happiness, it must be because the citizens neglected the divine commands and elected bad men to make and administer laws. So if we really want prosperity in our life and happiness, then we must vote for the right people. If we neglect this, and our laws will become a burden to us, and we will be under our own problem because we decided not to vote for a righteous person, right? So how important it is for casting a vote for the right person. So the citizen and the political party. Let's see, I'm going to go over this, and I think we'll stop right after this. So now we're going to talk about, because we're talking about political parties, let's talk about the citizen and the political party. So what are political parties? Well, political parties were created for the purpose of controlling government. Their task, to perform this task by getting the right men and the right women from their party elected into the public office. You know, today we have two parties called the bipartisan. We have a Republican Party and Democrat Party. And then we have an independent, but basically two parties. In countries like communist countries, they only have one party, the Communist Party. And then in the other countries, like Italy and France, they have many parties, and they call this multi-party. They have lots of parties. But in America, we basically have the two parties. And then America is also organized by our national level, our state level, and our local level. You know, we went over that already. Our state government, our county government, our city government, all important. So there are three groups of people involved in the party at each of these levels. First of all, we have, and this is, you'll need to know this right here. So what do we have? We first of all have the three groups. We have the party government. So this is, we're talking about the political party. So let's just take an example of the Republican Party. So we have the party government. The party government is made up of all the officials of that party that are elected. So all the Republicans that are working and they're official and they're working in the government is called the party government. And next there's the party organization. And these are made up of the political committees and the party chairmen and the workers of that party, of the Republic, are all working for the Republican Party. Their committees and all. And so the members of the party are not necessarily interested in running for office at all, but they are trying to get others elected. So you have this party organization trying to get others, say that trying to get the president elected, the Republican Party president elected. So they're all working together in this Republican Party or Democrat, but we're talking about, we'll just say the Republican Party in this. And the third group is made up of the voters, all the Republicans that say that they're Republicans that are voting. So you can do this with the Democrat Party too. So basically you have three levels. You have the party government made up of the officials that are working, they are elected officials. and then you'll have the organization, and they're trying to get others, Republicans elected. They're the committees and the chairs and the whole working of the whole party. And then you'll have the voters who vote. And the voters are probably the most important that vote and get those candidates that elected of their party. So the party organization. The basic unit again of the American political party is the precinct, and that's your local voting district. We already talked about the precinct. That's where your precinct is where you have to vote. So and so you may go and volunteer at your party precinct, especially if they're running for the primaries, and you can do things like, distributing flyers, making phone calls, visiting voters, or informing candidates of the issue. These are all important. In fact, you could even, as a young person, serve as a precinct captain for your precinct of your party organization. So it's important to know all about your party. You can be a member, a chairperson, going on. To be a delegate to later on, you could be a delegate to your party's state national convention. You can volunteer, again, stuffing envelopes, hanging posters, go out and put up posters, hand out flyers, doing phone calls. You can attend meetings, stay informed, and maybe someday you'll be running for office yourself to know about the political party. So let's go on here. Here's a picture. The speaker at a Republican National Convention there. So speaking. This next part is going to be on interest groups, and we're going to go into lobbying. And I think probably I'm not going to have enough time on this video, so let's divide it because it's going to get into talking about the news media and about polls, and then on to the character citizen should be. And so let's stop here, and then I'll go on to the next video, and this will be divided into two for section 2, but we don't have a section 3 really, so.